tell me something good.
Use the time he's got left. Show him how good his life can be.
Will's barely left the house in 2 years. We have tried.
Yes, but we haven't succeeded.
Will needs to be allowed to feel like a man.
Can I take you somewhere?
You are so going on a date with Will Trainer.
It's too baby.
Get the red dress out.
I don't want you to miss all the things that someone else could give you.
I have become a whole new person because of you.
I'm never afraid of shying away from more difficult topics because I think you shouldn't. I think if you cover fiction as a writer in the modern day, you should address the toughest subjects. When I wrote it, I had a couple of family situations which meant that quality of life was very high in my mind. I had 2 relatives who required 24-hour care just to stay alive. I think if you deal with that situation on any kind of lengthy basis, you can't help but ask yourself questions about how somebody lives and what kind of quality of life you can offer someone. It was inspired by real life, which is true of most of my books. I heard a news story about a young man, a sportsman, who had been left quadriplegic after an accident and who several years later had persuaded his parents to take him to a centre for assisted suicide. And I found this story profoundly shocking. I couldn't understand it. The more I read into the subject, the more I realised that it was a kind of extraordinary situation, but also one that it was very difficult to judge because unless you put yourself in somebody's shoes, I think you shouldn't judge their actions. I accept that it's a really tough subject and so you're going to attract strong opinions, but what I would say ultimately is this is a love story. It's about one woman trying to understand a decision that she finds incomprehensible. You know, what we have in Will Trainer is a man who is rigid and uncompromising and refuses in a way that is completely unusual to accept his new circumstances. And I wanted to ask the question, what happens when you are faced with someone who makes a decision that you do not agree with? I mean, the fact is, in the film, as in the book, nobody else agrees with what he decides to do. This is not by any means sending out a message. This is saying, what do you do in a particular human circumstance? And it's about autonomy and choice. And the fact is, I guess, you know, not everybody's going to agree with Will's decision. Everybody is fighting their own particular battle, but certainly it has no message beyond his own particular story.
There are so few films about these conditions that people then watch them and think, here's one that is about this condition and this man is seeking assisted suicide. I mean, Can you see that kind of point of view?
I can absolutely see that point of view. All I can say is, you know, I set out to write a book 4.5 years ago that was a love story about 2 people. In 4.5 years of thousands of reader responses, I have never had anybody take that message from this story. And so all I would hope is that if people get into his head and get into his shoes, perhaps they will understand that it's just about one character. It's nothing more than that. I think it's really important as a writer to just tell the story that preoccupies you. And when I told my then publishers what this story was, it's fair to say they were probably not attracted to the subject matter. And I get that, you know, it's a tricky subject matter. But for me, I just felt that I had a story to tell about ordinary people in an extraordinary situation. I think it's just a very human story.